Okay, I guess it's time, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Beef Cattle webinar series that we're going to be offering every other Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Mountain Time. You can follow us on Facebook at UI Beef, and we're also going to upload these webinars to our YouTube channel, University of Idaho Extension Livestock. So for anybody who wants to review the webinars or share with others to watch on their own time, that's where you'll be able to find those, either on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Anybody who's watching live, what we're going to do is any questions that you might have, go ahead and put in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we're going to address those periodically throughout the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. John Hall, who's our UI Extension Beef Specialist, and he'll be talking about estrus synchronization today for both AI and natural service.
Thank you, Melinda. And I'd also like to thank Miranda Small, Melinda, Dr. Ellison, and Miranda Small were kind of the ramrods of this and to get this started. And so good afternoon. Glad to be here with you this afternoon. And we're going to go over some aspects of estrus synchronization, a little bit about AI. And as we go through, we kind of break it into sections of this presentation. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about why estrus synchronization might be useful or profitable for us. Some basics about how estrus synchronization drugs work and what they're really doing in the cow. And then we'll go into both programs for heifers and for cows. And then we'll end up with talking about estrus synchronization for natural service. So for those of you that might want to group up cows but still use bulls, there's a way to do that and be able to utilize some of the benefits of estrus synchronization. So with that, I will hopefully start sharing my screen again. And see if we can move forward here. So again, thank you. We're talking today about concepts in estrus synchronization. So the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that a lot of the information that you'll hear today is coming through the Beef Reproduction Task Force. It's a group of us from extension beef specialists and scientists from a variety of states across the country that have worked together to formulate the estrus synchronization protocols that you're going to see, and also have visited with animal health companies as well as the AI studs to get their input into these estrus synchronization programs. It's very important to note that the programs that we'll show you today have been tested across the United States in thousands of cows, and so they are very well established protocols, and we encourage you to stick with those. These are also listed in the back of any AI stud catalog that you might have. So let's talk a little bit about estrus synchronization and AI. AI is arguably one of our most powerful tools for rapid change in productivity and quality. And if we look at what AI has done to the dairy industry, it has increased milk production by about 150 pounds per year in the dairy industry. So where are we with AI in the US in both beef and dairy? Well, in the dairy, about 85% of registered Holsteins are a product of AI, with over 66% of the dairy cows being bred AI. In contrast, only about 8% of beef operations use any kind of estrus synchronization, and only about 7.5% of those operations are using AI, whether they use estrus synchronization or just do total estrus detection. So there's a big opportunity for us to utilize that, and one of the challenges to doing that, of course, is that AI is very labor intensive. It takes a good amount of labor. It takes gathering cows in, it takes checking heat. And so estrus synchronization systems that we'll talk about today have really been designed to try and reduce the labor component and increase the effectiveness of AI in a beef herd. So one of the other challenges that we're presently facing today is that we continue to have a smaller cow herd than probably we have in almost any time in U.S. history, but we're still seeing good demand for beef, and we also are seeing a high demand by the consumer to produce more high quality beef. And so AI allows us to access some bulls that have extremely high marbling and also have high growth and other traits that bring profitability to the cow-calf operation. A reminder though, before we start any kind of synchronization program or look at AI, if we've never been doing AI before, we really need to go back to our basics and remember our basic management that we're doing with the herd. Make sure that the cows and heifers are in good body condition score, that your nutrition program is adequate and we've got good mineral program. That if we're breeding cows, cows are 40 days or more post-calving so that they have the opportunity to cycle, as well as the reproductive tract has returned to its normal state to be ready to accept a pregnancy. Heifers need to be well developed, and we need to understand and follow the systems very carefully. So that's what we're going to spend some time today, is understanding those systems. So why should we bother with estrous synchronization? I mean, it isn't cheap sometimes, depending on which method that we use, and it does take some labor. One of the things, if we're talking about AI, is if we look at our ability to detect estrus in a group of beef cows out on pasture, and we're using only twice a day estrus detection, we can see that we miss a lot of cows, and when we're not doing a very good job. If we increase that intensity to 3 to 5 times per day, then we definitely do a much better job of finding cows in heat, but we've increased our labor costs and our expense. So one of the reasons we might want to use estrus synchronization is we're not really very good at estrus detection. In addition, estrus synchronization gives us an opportunity to induce cycles in cows that aren't cycling yet. Another thing is important. Dr. Harlan Hughes, who is from North Dakota State, who now actually resides in Idaho, had done a lot of work with herds in his CHAPS program and found that those herds that had the greatest profitability had more calves born in the first 21 days of the calving season than herds that were in the lower profitability range. And so one of our big opportunities is to move more calves to being born earlier in the calving season to increase profitability for the cow-calf operation. And estrus synchronization gives us that opportunity. Another thing about having those heifers calve early in the calving season is that we see that those heifers that calve in the first 21 days of the calving season, as illustrated by this particular graph from the Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska, the black bar, solid bar on top, shows those heifers that calved in the first 21 days of their first calving season. And those heifers stayed in the herd longer and produced more pounds of beef in their lifetime than heifers that calved later in their first calving season. The other thing that we can do is by shifting those calves to the earlier part of the calving season, we'll increase some weaning weights and increase some profitability. This particular graph shows, with the dotted line, shows a typical, this was a herd out of Missouri Research Station, and the dotted line shows what their calving distribution was when they were using all natural service over a period of about 3 years. Then they shifted to estrus detection and AI. That's the squares. And you can see that they increased the amount of calves coming early in the calving season. Then when they switched to fixed timed AI, they were having approximately 70% of the calves on the ground in the first 21 days. What that relates to is for every 21 days earlier in the calving season a calf is born, it will be 35 to 50 pounds heavier at weaning. And depending on where the calf market is, that results in $50 to $75 increased value per calf. The last thing to mention about what we can do with AI is if we take it all the way to retaining ownership on those animals, we can increase returns to cow. And so this particular operation is a 600 cow operation in Virginia, which has been using AI for a long period of time. And they used they kept track of whether the calves were a product of an AI sire and an AI dam. So the dam was also the product of an AI sire, or the other combinations of AI and natural service, whether that came from the dam side or the sire side. So natural service sire, natural service dam calves, those calves, their value was listed as par, so 100%. And then they looked at what was the relative increase in value. So those AI sired calves from AI sired dams ended up bringing in about 22% more returns to the cow than their counterparts. In addition, any calf that had an AI in its lineage resulted, when they retained ownership, in grading a much higher percentage choice than calves that were from natural service bulls. And they bought very high quality natural service bulls with good carcass numbers as well. The other thing that's shown from CAB, we can see if we improve the genetics and sorting of cattle that enter the feedlot, we greatly increase the grading of those animals, and more of those animals fall into the CAB range, as well as a higher percentage choice, and even getting more cattle into the prime grade, which is becoming increasingly in demand from the consumer. The last thing to kind of end up on value is, if you're looking at the value of bred heifers that may come off of your operation, this is a system that's in Missouri, where they use, they have a special bred heifer program, and those bred heifers that were products of AI, and then they had calves that were products of AI in them, so there's bred heifers, those heifers were worth about $300 to $400 more than heifers that were natural sired or serviced and also had calves that were products of natural sires. So there's value in those extra calves if they come, if you're going to sell any bred heifers. So one of the things that we hear about from producers is a valid concern. If I synchronize all my cows and breed them AI on a single day, will my calves all come at the same time? And the answer to that is no. They'll be spread out over about a 2-week period. And that's just because of the natural variation in gestation length in individual cows and individual calves. So this graph has a lot of has 6 different bulls from different farms. And they looked at when did those calves come relative to the predicted day. So the predicted day was 281 days after AI. And that's shown by the black bar in each one of these graphs. Each of these graphs are groups of cows that are about 125 to 140 cows that are calving to a synchronized estrus. And you can see that those calves are scattered out over about a 2-week period, and that in most cases, there's 6 to 9, 6 to 10 calves coming per day. In individual days, there may be 2 or 3 days when there's over 10 calves coming per day. Here at the research station at the Nancy Cummings Center, we'll have about 180 to 190 cows that are bred to calve on a single day. And the most calves that we usually see in a single day are about 20 to 25 calves bred to that synchronized estrus. And we too see those calves spread out over about a 2-week period. The other thing that people ask is, can I use estrus synchronization with natural service? And you bet, you can sure use it with natural service. And towards the end of this presentation, we'll be talking about systems that we can use with natural service right before we introduce the bulls. So let's take a break from maybe why we should synchronize or what may happen as a result of synchronization. And let's talk about some of the basics of estrus synchronization and how these systems work and how it mimics the physiology of the cow. So let's talk a little bit about the estrus cycle of the cow. So cows are in heat first, and then about 30 hours later, they ovulate. And that egg is released and then fertilized by the sperm, if we're using natural service, that the bull has placed inside the cow. And if we're using AI, we breed about 12 hours after estrus if we're not doing a fixed timed AI. And so the sperm actually needs to be in the female reproductive tract prior to ovulation in order for the sperm to undergo some physiological changes called capacitation, which allows it to fertilize the egg. After that ovulation occurs, then the follicle forms a structure called the CL, which produces progesterone. Progesterone has two functions. One is to keep the cow out of heat so that she doesn't show heat, but the most important function is to prepare the uterus of the cow to accept a pregnancy. After that ovulation occurs, the cow immediately starts to generate the next group of follicles that would be the next possible ovulation. During about 2 days after she ovulates, she starts with a large group of follicles that get recruited. Then that group of follicles is finally selected because of FSH and LH coming from the brain of the cow. They affect that follicle, and then they cause one follicle to become the dominant follicle. So usually in cows, there's only one follicle that has an egg in it, has the oocyte in it, that eventually ovulates and can become fertilized. If that cow has had a normal cycle and the CL is still present, then that first follicular wave, that follicle will die, it becomes atretic, and a new follicular wave will appear. Most cows have 2 follicular waves during the 21-day estrus cycle, but some cows have 3 follicular waves. And we'll talk about why these follicular waves are important in terms of estrous synchronization in a minute. The second follicular wave is the wave that ends up ovulating if the cow does not become pregnant. She'll come into heat, and then she will ovulate that egg that is matured in this follicle. So what's happening in this estrus cycle is estrus occurs, ovulation occurs, progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum, which forms from the ruptured follicle. New follicles are produced in 2 waves during the cycle, and those follicles also produce estrogen as well as develop the egg inside. Estrogen causes the cow to become in heat to express estrus, behavioral estrus, when progesterone is low. And so at the end of the cycle, that CL dies and progesterone goes down, and then estrogen becomes high and the cow expresses estrus and then ovulates. So we can mimic those same things by using products that are available from animal health companies. The first one is GnRH. GnRH causes the release of luteinizing hormone, and that hormone is what causes the follicle to ovulate, or it encourages new follicles to grow. These are the trade names for the products that are forms of GnRH that you can purchase from various companies. Another drug that we will use is prostaglandin. That is a naturally occurring hormone that is released by the uterus, which causes that CL to die and allows the follicle to ovulate and the cow to come in heat. Again, these are the variety of names of those products from different health companies. We want to make sure that we follow the protocols that we're going to talk about very specifically, and we're going to give the injections in the correct manner, and we give the proper dose according to the label. The other thing we want to do when we use these products is we want to follow BQA guidelines and make sure that we're giving all injections in the neck in the manner that they were supposed to be given. The other products that we use are forms of progesterone. And remember, we said that progesterone keeps cows from coming in heat. The most common one that we use now is the cedar. That's this Y-shaped plastic insert that is actually inserted into the vagina of the cow and releases progesterone that leaks out through the pores in the plastic. Another progesterone, which is an analog to progesterone, is MGA. And MGA was first developed to use in feedlots to keep feedlot heifers from coming in heat. But it also has been approved for estrous synchronization in heifers. Right now, most of the programs that we use are really eliminating estrus detection and focusing on synchronizing ovulation rather than synchronizing cows that are in heat. We're going to talk a lot today about fixed-timed estrous synchronization programs for fixed-timed AI, but we're also going to visit a little bit about estrous synchronization programs that we can use if you would rather detect estrus and breed cows that you see that come into heat. So let's talk about how we might use the products that we've talked about in an estrus cycle of the cow. Here's a cow. She was in estrus on the first day of her cycle, and she ovulated. Then she started to produce a new follicular wave. If we go in at day 6, and normally that follicular wave would last to about day 12, and we give GnRH, we can cause this follicle to ovulate or to form a CL. When we do that, the next follicular wave will start to grow in that cow. And so one of the reasons that you'll see that we use GnRH in a lot of these protocols is to start a new follicular wave, so we're getting all the cows growing follicles at the same time at roughly the same rate. Next, we would put in a seeder to prevent heat expression in any of these cows as we have ovulated that follicle, and some of those cows might have had fairly high levels of estrogen. We keep cows out of heat. Also, there may be cows that are just coming into heat on their own when we gave this shot of GnRH. When we take the seeder out, we'll give a shot of prostaglandin to kill the CL and allow the follicle that has grown to continue growing and then ovulate. If the cows come in estrus, we might breed off of that heat, but if they don't, we'll give another shot of GnRH, which will cause the follicle to ovulate and release the egg, and then we will inseminate the cows at the same time. So let's talk about some systems for heifers. I know that's probably been a little confusing to you to go over that so quickly, but if you have questions, just let me know, and we can revisit anything that you have questions on. So let's talk about some systems for heifers. We're really going to talk and spend most of our time today about fixed-timed AI protocols, but as I mentioned, we will also talk about other protocols as well. So the 7-day co-sync plus seeder protocol is one of the most common protocols that is used by producers that want to synchronize heifers for fixed-timed AI. It involves giving GnRH at the start to start a new follicular wave. At the same time, we insert a seeder to prevent heifers from coming in heat. 7 days later, we remove that seeder and we give a shot of prostaglandin to bring the heifers into heat and to kill the CL that might be on that ovary. At 54 hours later, we will breed that cow, breed all the heifers, regardless of whether they've shown heat or not. Any heifer that hasn't shown heat, we will give GnRH. If we're not sure whether the heifers were in heat, we would give GnRH anyway. So this protocol is 100 milligrams of GnRH injected at the same time we insert a seeder. Then we give 25 milligrams of prostaglandin, usually in the form of lutulise, but we might be using estromate. And then 45 hours later, we will breed all the heifers regardless of estrus expression. A very similar protocol is the 5-day co-sync plus seeder protocol. This protocol is one that allows a little bit longer development of the follicle during the time from seeder removal to AI. And our original thoughts were this would increase the pregnancy rate in these heifers. I'll show you some data in a minute and when we compared those two systems. So we give GnRH, we put the seeder in, but for only 5 days. We give a shot of prostaglandin, but then we have to come back 8 hours later and give a second shot of prostaglandin. And that's because if there were any CLs that formed as a result of this GnRH shot, those CL are very unresponsive to an initial shot of prostaglandin. So it takes a second shot of prostaglandin to get the heifers to come into heat. We wait for 60 hours after we have removed the seeder and given the first shot of prostaglandin, and then we breed the heifers AI and give a shot of GnRH to any heifer that hasn't been in heat prior to the start of AI. Those are the short-term protocols, but of interest to other producers are long-term protocols. And one of the values of a long-term protocol in heifers is that not all heifers may be cycling at the start when we start a synchronization program. The short-term estrous synchronization protocols work very well in heifers that are cycling, and also will induce heifers to cycle in response to that short-term protocol. But sometimes those heifers that are induced to cycle have a lower fertility rate. With these long-term protocols, we can induce heifers to cycle, and basically what we're doing is breeding them on the second cycle that follows the initial cycle that was induced by a long-term treatment with progestin. So we can either feed MGA for 14 days, or we can put a cedar in for 14 days. And then we come back, in the case of the cedar MGA protocol, we'll come back 19 days later when all the heifers have a CL and give them a shot of prostaglandin. And then we'll wait 72 hours for those heifers to come into heat. And after they come into heat, or even if they don't, we will breed all the heifers at 72 hours after we gave the shot of prostaglandin. In the cedar PG protocol, we'll only wait 16 days to give that shot of prostaglandin, and we'll wait only 66 hours after we give prostaglandin to AI the heifers and give the shot of GnRH. It's very important that when we're talking about these protocols that you follow very carefully the time interval from the end of MGA feeding or the end of cedar when cedars are removed to prostaglandin. The difference is in the timing is due to the difference in the way these particular products work in the animal. MGA is a feed additive, so it takes longer to clear the body than a cedar. That is, as soon as we remove the cedar from the animal, the source of progesterone is gone from the animal. So let's talk about what we can expect if we use these synchronization systems. So this particular study shows a large number of heifers that were bred we're using different estrous synchronization protocols and the pregnancy rates that resulted when they were bred at fixed timed AI. 7-day cedar plus co-sync protocol that we talked about, the short-term protocol, resulted in about 46% of the heifers being pregnant to AI, as compared to the long-term MGA prostaglandin protocol with about 43%, so really no difference between these two. But the 14-day cedar prostaglandin protocol had a greater success rate with about 53% of heifers that were bred to fixed timed AI following this protocol becoming pregnant. And so what we see is this long-term protocol with a cedar gives us a better results. And particularly what it does is gives us a better result in those heifers that were not cycling. If we look at the differences, you can see that the non-cycling heifers in the short-term protocol or the long-term MGA protocol that were induced to cycle in response to that or showed estrus in response to that had a lower pregnancy rate, as opposed to those that saw cedar had a higher pregnancy rate. And that's why we ended up with a greater pregnancy rate overall in response to fixed timed AI. Another study that we did with the university at Washington State University and we participated in Idaho looked at about almost 1,000 heifers or 900 heifers that got either the short-term 5-day co-sync plus cedar protocol or the long-term 14-day plus cedar fixed timed AI protocol. Both of these protocols resulted in about 55% of the heifers becoming pregnant to a fixed timed AI, whether we used a short-term or a long-term protocol. So this tells us that both of these protocols are very acceptable to use in heifers. And really, when we talk about fixed timed AI, synchronization rates, and pregnancy rates in heifers, we're looking at about 55 to 60% is what we can average overall. You might be interested in just doing heat detection and then AIing heifers. And these are 3 different protocols. We won't spend a lot of time on them today. They're also in the back of the AI stud book catalogs, and so you can look at these. The one is what we're very familiar with, the one-shot prostaglandin. That particular protocol, you would start heat detecting and breed heifers for 5 days, and then give a shot of prostaglandin to any heifer that you had not inseminated, and then heat detect and breed heifers for another 7 days after that. The 7-day CEDAR plus PG, that particular protocol, you put in a CEDAR for 7 days. You don't give GnRH up front. Give prostaglandin when you take the CEDAR out, and then you heat detect in AI for about 5 days after you remove the CEDAR. MGA prostaglandin system is just like the one we talked about for fixed time to AI, except what you're doing is heat detecting an AI for 6 to 7 days after you give the shot of prostaglandin. You can also combine heat estrus detection with a fixed time AI, or what we call a cleanup AI. I'm not going to go into these protocols. They're very similar to the fixed time protocols, except the thing you need to note is that the interval from prostaglandin, giving prostaglandin, to the fixed time AI or cleanup AI insemination is about 72 to 84 hours. What you're doing during these 3 days is you're heat detecting at least twice a day, and then breeding cows that come into heat, or heifers that come into heat 12 hours after you saw them in heat. And then any heifer that had not expressed heat and been inseminated by 72 to 84 hours, then are mass inseminated and given a shot in GnRH at the same time. So hopefully that's helped you a little bit to understand some opportunities for estrus, for synchronization and AI and heifers. And really, if you've not tried artificial insemination before, heifers are really the group that you really want to try as artificial insemination on. They're a lot easier to handle in terms of labor because we don't have to sort off calves. And of course, we can utilize bulls that have extremely high accuracy for calving ease and reduce any dystocia problems that we have in our heifers. So what about cows? What about if we want to breed cows? Most of the time we don't have the luxury of using a long-term system in cows. So the two systems that we use in cows are very similar to the ones that we talked about with heifers, the two short-term systems. The 7-day co-sync plus CEDAR for cows. Same as for heifers. We give GnRH, we put the CEDAR in the animal, we take the CEDAR out, and we give a shot of luteolise or prostaglandin, where it might be estromate, might be another product, but a prostaglandin product. And then we wait 66 hours until we do that fixed timed AI and give a shot of GnRH at the same time. Now remember, this time is different than what we used in heifers, and that's because heifers tend to come into heat earlier than do cows after we give the shot of prostaglandin. The same thing happens with the 5-day co-sync plus CEDAR, GnRH, CEDAR for 5 days, shot of prostaglandin, 8 to 12 hours later, another shot of prostaglandin, and then we breed all the cows and give a shot of GnRH 72 hours after we gave the first shot of prostaglandin. So two pretty simple protocols. Because of the number of shots and the cost of these, it costs about $20 per cow to synchronize a cow with these systems that use a CEDAR. We also examined all the data looking at the 7-day co-sync plus CEDAR protocol versus the 5-day plus co-sync plus CEDAR protocol. Note that these data include almost 18,000 inseminations for the 7-day plus co-syncs plus CEDAR and 8,000 inseminations for the 5-day. Really, there's no difference in pregnancy rate between these two systems. And you can choose the one that fits best for your system or the one you like best. Honestly, you will see a few more animals in heat in the 5-day co-sync plus CEDAR protocol than you will in the 7-day co-sync plus CEDAR protocol. But as you can see, pregnancy rates will be very similar. Over this large number of studies, they average 58 to 61%, and the range of that is about 48% up all the way to 70% pregnancy rates for fixed timed AI using these synchronization methods. We won't talk about this, but to remind you that if you have Bos Indicus cattle, so if you've got Brangus or Brayford or Brahman cattle that you're breeding and you want to synchronize, we use a totally different synchronization system for those animals. Anything with Brahma influence they just have a different physiology, and this is the system that's been worked out by the group at Texas A&M. It involves a lot more injections. It's a 5-day CEDAR protocol. It gives prostaglandin when we give the GnRH and we put the CEDAR in, and then 2 shots of prostaglandin with fixed timed AI 72 hours after. So just remember, those Brahma cross cattle are different, and we have to use a different synchronization system. So really, if we want to do a good job with estrous synchronization and AI, we need to use those estrous synchronizations that work. And we know that if we use estrous synchronization systems that involve a CEDAR, then they'll work in cycling and non-cycling cows. We can eliminate estrus detection if we want to. We need to have proper facilities and be good at handling those animals in a quiet way. Another thing I want to encourage you to do is use semen that comes from a certified semen producer. So all the big AI companies, ABS, Select Sires, Origin, GenX, all of those are CSS certified producers, and there are some custom semen collecting services that are CSS. Those groups have established a very high quality standard for semen to be packaged and to be approved and to go out to producers. Sometimes you'll see with custom collected semen that doesn't come from a collection group that uses these criteria, you might be disappointed in your outcome. And then of course, in all of these systems with beef cattle, we're usually going ahead and using bulls to clean up the cows for another 45 to 60 days after we do the initial AI. So we need to use experienced and breeding soundness exam tested cleanup bulls. Just like with the heifers, there are some options if we want to do just heat detection in AI, or we want to use heat detection with estrus with a cleanup AI. And again, I'm not going to go into these in detail. You can look at them in the back of the AI catalogs. One I will call your attention to is the prostaglandin plus 6-day CEDAR. This really synchronizes cows really well, and also but gives us an opportunity to do a lot of breeding on heat, resulting in a pretty high pregnancy rate for these cows. First, what we do is give a shot of prostaglandin, detect heat for 3 days, breed anything that comes into heat. Any cow then that we did not breed, so we've really reduced our costs at this point in time, because we're not going to put a CEDAR in every single cow, just the ones that we didn't already breed. Then we give GnRH, we put in a CEDAR for 6 days, we give a shot of prostaglandin when we take the CEDAR out, and then heat check and breed for about another 3 to 4 days. This has been a pretty good system, and producers have liked it really well. It was developed by the guys in South Dakota State, and they're finding a good results with this particular system. Just a little more complicated than some of the ones that we've looked at. Again, we can do a synchronized AI with heat detection, and then do a cleanup AI at the end. Again, these are in your AI catalogs. And again, if you have questions, you can feel free to contact me or your local extension professional. So let's talk about synchronization with natural service. Folks often ask, can they synchronize cows for natural service? And a lot of times they get scared about it because we talk about breeding all the cows in one day, and certainly we can't expect a bull to breed all the cows in the herd in one day. And that's not what we're trying to do when we use synchronization with natural service. Instead of bringing cows into heat over maybe as little as 1 day to as many as 3, as we're doing when we try an AI, what we want to do is bring cows in heat over about 7 days. So those bulls have a better chance to be able to breed all the cows. And so there are several systems that we can use. The first one is one that's commonly used in heifers, works really well. I'd encourage you, if you're interested in doing synchronization with natural service, to try this in heifers. What we do is we start feeding MGA. That's a 0.5 milligram of MGA per head per day, fed in about 3 to 5 pounds of grain. We go out there, we need to go at the same time every day and feed the heifers. And we need to feed those heifers in enough bunk space so that every heifer can get her share. We do that every day for 14 days, and then we stop feeding MGA. We'll see a bunch of heifers in heat after we feed that MGA, after we stop feeding that MGA. But those heifers will have a subfertile estrus, and so we don't want to breed those heifers on that estrus. What we want to do is about 13 days, about 10 to 13 days later, we want to put those bulls in, and we want to put bulls in at a ratio of about 1 mature bull for 20 heifers or 1 younger bull for 15 heifers. Work that's been done in a lot of places shows that we see about 70% of the heifers becoming pregnant to the synchronized estrus, and we get 83 to 85% of the heifers conceiving in the first 30 days of the breeding season. Very similar system would be to put a seeder in for 14 days instead of feeding MGA. We can use this in both cows and heifers. MGA is not approved. It's not legal for use in cows, but it is legal for use in heifers. So that's why we use the seeder in the cows. And again, 10 days later, we put in bulls. A couple of other shorter term systems that we can use is to turn the bulls in for 5 days. Then on day 5, we bring all the cows up. We give all the cows prostaglandin, and then we will turn the cows back out with the bulls. Usually we might wait 2 days and then turn the bulls back in after we give them prostaglandin, and then leave the bulls in for your normal breeding season, whatever that length of that breeding season is for your operation. What that does is it allows the bulls to breed some of those cows that are coming into heat on their own. Then we synchronize those cows. Those cows will come into heat over about a 7-day period. And then again, if we keep our bull ratio about 1 mature bull to 25 cows, we'll see those bulls be able to handle those cows, and we'll tighten up the breeding season. Work that was done in Nebraska illustrated that that particular system would increase the percentage of cows calving in the first 21 to 30 days of the calving season by about 12 to 20% increase in cows calving in that early part. The other one we can use is the 7-day seeder without any shots. We just put in a seeder for 7 days. We take the seeder out. Then we put the bulls in the day after we take the seeder out. And then again, leave those bulls in for our normal length of the breeding season. What can we expect with that? Work that's been done looking at the 7-day seeder plus the control, control was just turning bulls in. The bulls were turned in at the same time. Different number of cows. Pregnancy rate was increased by using the synchronization with natural service, and also greatly shifted the percentage of cows calving in the first 30 days, increase of almost 40%, or about 35% increase in cows calving at the first 30 days. So really a profitable system there where we can tighten those cows up, get those heavier weaning weights, and increase income coming back to the thing. One of the things I'd like to do is mention the Estrous synchronization planner. This particular planner, and maybe we can have this another webinar, we can go through this Estrous synchronization planner. It's available free to download at this website. So I'll give you some time to copy that website down. Otherwise, you just Google the Iowa Beef Center and Estrous synchronization planner, and it'll take you right to that site. This is an Excel spreadsheet. So as long as you have Excel that runs on your computer, you'll be able to run this free spreadsheet. It allows you to select a system, whether that be a fixed timed AI system or a heat detect system, synchronization system. And then basically what you input is what system you want and what day you want the cows bred. And then it will come back and generate a plan for you and a calendar for you that says this is when this is the day that you would inject GnRH and put in the seeder. This is the day you would take the seeder out, and this is what time of day you need to take the cedar out to make sure that you're breeding when you want to. Because some of those protocols that require you to wait 66 hours, if you pull the cedar at the wrong time of day, you'll be trying to breed cows at 4 o'clock in the morning. And most of us don't want to do that. So this is just a great tool for you. Again, it's free to download from the Iowa Beef Center. And if you have any questions, we can get online and we can do some demonstration work with it. Just kind of close. Estrous synchronization is something we really need to think about, whether we're going to use it with natural service or with AI. Of course, I'm a proponent of AI, and I think we can really improve our genetics. This is a nice photograph here of some first calf heifers with their AI calves with them. Pretty good set of cattle. So some keys to successful synchronization in beef females is really we want estrous synchronization and planning to start before calving. And that means the reason that is to have our nutrition program in good shape and make sure the cows are getting what they need so that they're going to cycle back quickly after calving. We evaluate the body condition score in those cows, try and make sure our cows are body condition score 5 or 6 at calving, and that they're enough days postpartum when we start synchronization. No cow should ever be started on an estrous synchronization program if she is less than 20 days post-calving. We need to have a good nutritional program. We didn't talk about calf removal, but that's a possibility. And if you want to visit with me or your estrus or your extension professional about that, that's something we can consider. But again, that's more labor. And with the synchronization methods that we have talked about today, we don't see a big benefit to calf removal. And certainly to have proper facilities so that you can handle cattle quietly and you can move through cattle quickly and get inseminations done when we do fixed timed AI. We would like to get all the inseminations done in about a 4 to 5 hour period for all the cows that are going to come through the chute that day. If we use systems that include cedar or MGA, we're going to induce cycles in non-cycling females, and we're going to see a lot better response, both in terms of estrus and in terms of pregnancy rates to AI or to bulls if we're using a natural service system. And then our timed AI systems work very, very well. And in fact, I think if you go through them one time and you'll see that the amount of labor that's involved with them is considerably less than any other way that you've done AI in the past, especially if you've done all estrus detection and pulled hot cows and bred cows off of heat. With that, I'd like to kind of close up for today. We're at about 50 minutes into listening to me prattle on. And I'd like to mention that in 2 weeks, our next webinar is going to feature Miranda Small, the extension educator from Bingham County, and she's going to talk about spring work, our herd vaccination protocols and processing, and things that we can do to make sure that not only our calves are vaccinated, but our cows are vaccinated well and ready for the start of yet another exciting year. With that, I'd like to answer any questions if you have them. My email address is up here at the top, jbhall@uidaho.edu. You can call me at the phone number listed there. If you have any more questions or are interested in more information of the things that we've talked about today, you can also find that information at this website, the UNL, University of Nebraska Beef Resources website. And don't forget about the Estrous Synchronization Planner website as well. This particular website not only has information on the synchronization systems, it has connections to the Applied Reproductive Strategies meetings that we have every year that go more in depth about what we talked about today. And it also has a link to the Estrous Synchronization Planner if you are interested. So I hope you all have a good spring and get along well with your breeding season. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. And we appreciate your time and attention today.
John?
Yes.
We do have a question right now.
Okay.
They would like to know, do they need a veterinarian prescription for any of those products that you've talked about today?
Very good question. So do you need a vet's prescription for the products that we talked about? And yes, you do. The prostaglandin and the GnRH are prescription products. MGA and Cedars are over-the-counter products. So MGA, usually you have to buy that through a feed mill that's licensed to use MGA and formulate feeds with MGA in it. Good question. Thank you.